All right. We are a little crazy. Welcome to the podcast. I'm David Magee. With me is the Phoebe Goodwin.
Hey, David.
Hey, what were your favorite subjects in college? I've always meant to ask. You majored in journalism. You're quite the history buff, or no?
No. I'm interesting when it comes to school because I'm really good at studying.
Yeah.
But I'm really good at forgetting. And so I study really well. And then I take the test, and then I can't tell you anything. So my favorite classes were my creative writing classes because you can't really get a bad grade because...
Unless you don't do it.
Art is relative, I guess.
Sure.
And so if you finished a poem or a short story, you would get an A. So I loved those classes.
And you won an award in creative writing
Yeah,
your senior year at the
I
university.
did. That was one of the most special moments of all of college. The end of senior year was a huge full circle moment where so many things were redeemed and I was recognized for a lot of the work I did, which that was not the story in high school. So it was really cool. My first short story actually that I ever wrote it's titled Jack's Girls, and it won the Ella Somerville Creative Writing Award for prose.
Well, you are officially a writer once you get published or you win an award. It's official. You're a writer.
And I won a prize. I won $250.
Well, when you win a cash prize for writing, you are officially a writer. Congratulations.
$250 is rich when you're in college. I was like, I'm rolling in it, y'all. $250 now. I'm like, maybe I can get a tank of gas with that.
Then you'll just be headed on to book advances. Do you dream of writing one day?
I think so. I really think so.
Fiction or nonfiction, or do you life will have to unfold before you know?
Whatever earns me a little more than $250.
Okay, there you go.
We can make it work. But I would love to write a book. I'm just figuring out what's worth writing about.
Okay, speaking of, back for another episode, my sister Ruthie Lindsey. She has her story. There I Am, her book. You can find her newsletter, Love's Invitation, on Substack. You can follow her on Instagram. But you need to hear the rest of her story. My sister Ruthie Lindsey. What a gift to get to do 2 episodes. What a gift to have her as a sister. Ruthie, we talked in the last episode. We've both been through breakdowns, but you had something significant happen in a physical way, certainly with emotional impact as well. You had this accident. 1 minute, you're the homecoming queen. You're living your life, trying to fill that picture. The next minute, boom.
Yeah.
What
2
happened?
weeks later, I had organized a group of friends to go into Baton Rouge to go to this place called Celebration Station. I was kind of always like the ringleader, making fun things happen. And a bunch of us were driving into Baton Rouge from St. Francisville, and we had stopped at a gas station, and I had no sense of direction, and I was trying to keep up with everyone, and we did not have smartphones back then. And, I had just turned 17, maybe 3 weeks before that. I was a kid, and I pulled out onto Highway 61 and was hit by an ambulance going 65 on my car door. My car door ended up in the passenger seat. I was out for at least 3 or 4 minutes, and I broke the top 2 vertebrae in my neck, C1 and C2, which usually people don't survive that or are brain dead or at least paralyzed. It's very rare. There's a 1% chance to walk, 5% chance to live. And also broke a bunch of other things, ribs, lungs collapsed, spleen ruptured. And thankfully it was an ambulance driver, so he knew not to just pull me out to revive me or anything. He knew to secure my neck, which if, my friend that was in the car accident with me, which thank God he was not harmed, who's also related to Laura through marriage, my sister-in-law. He was my best friend in high school, and thankfully the ambulance driver knew not to let them just pull me out, and they were able to secure my neck until the other ambulance got there. I was on life support for a while. I don't remember a whole lot at the time. I would have told you it was way harder for my family because I don't remember a lot. My body obviously remembers the trauma, but I was in the hospital almost a month. After I was off life support, they, and was stable enough, they took bone from my hip and fused it into my neck with wire. And that's was standard in the late 90s. They used wire for spinal cord fusions. And that plays a big role in a piece later in my life. And, I went back to life as normal after almost a month. It happened on my dad's birthday, November 2nd, 1996. I went back to school after Christmas, had a big old neck brace for 4 or 5 months. I had a big old perma smile like nothing had happened. What's interesting? I remember a year later, I graduated on time, didn't do a minute of therapy, never cried about it, just kind of pretended like nothing had happened. Mm-hmm. And I remember a year later being at home for my dad's birthday, which was November 2nd. And the wreck happened on a Saturday, so a year later it was a Sunday. So we went to church. And I remember the pastor talking about it and how grateful he was that I was there. And I remember sitting beside my mom, and she was just wailing, and she was crying so hard. And I specifically remember looking at her and being like, what's the big deal? I'm fine. Because I had no tools. I had just built such walls around. It was so traumatizing that I had shut down so much to survive, right? We disassociate to survive. It kept me alive, but I was so fully disassociated and deep in anorexia at the time. I was starving myself. And that was for me, it was a semblance of control. I started my freshman year of college. I'd had this massive, massive trauma, but I just showed up smiling and, no one would have ever known the difference. I won like most popular in my sorority freshman year. And no one would know.
Oh, yeah.
No one would know. I had zero tools to handle any of it. And that was kind of the narrative all through college. I got very involved in the church while I was in college, and it fed a lot of the stories that I already really believed, because I did believe I was broken and depraved and something was inherently wrong with me. And then that's also what I was being taught with what I was involved in college, and it fit my narrative. I already believed something was wrong with me, right? And a lot of that stemmed from a lot of early childhood stuff too, of just wanting to be perfect, wanting to have it all together, not having tools, knowing how to feel emotions, not being allowed to feel certain emotions. Anger was allowed for my dad, but that's about it. I just needed to be sweet, kind, pretty, and really obedient. Obedient was and respectful was the most important thing. And my older brother had gotten in a lot of trouble when he was in high school, and he was my everything. I literally slept in his room till he graduated high school. He helped raise me. He was my end all be all, like loved me so deeply. I was his. I was really his. And my mom had had a lot of hard stuff happen, and when she was pregnant with me, she was having a lot of struggles, and she also didn't have tools. We did not have money at all. And my dad, as precious and amazing as he was, he didn't do babies. He never changed one diaper, not one. He never got up with us in the night, and she didn't have money to get babysitters. So we didn't have money, and she was doing it all on her own. So you can imagine that was heartbreaking.
There was a lot of tension in the house.
Yes, and she didn't have tools, and she didn't know how to do it either, because and also her mama had died when she was super young. So there's a lot there that I've learned later in life about pre-verbal stuff and lack of attunement and attachment and things, and that was all a big part of, another part of disassociating.
Right.
So I was just going through life like very disassociated with the biggest smile on my face, and knew what I needed. I have a memory of second grade. And like this shows, I couldn't read. I had major learning disabilities. I learned what you were saying kind of earlier. I think
study. I inherited some of those in that same DNA line.
Yes. I could study and memorize the second it was over. I learned what I needed to do to get my grades, but I didn't learn.
Yeah.
Right. And I couldn't read until third grade.
Wow.
I had but it was never diagnosed or anything like that. I just, figured out what I needed to do. I had really high emotional intelligence. I knew what I needed to do to get people to like me, to get the grades I needed to get. Right. And I remember this conscious thought in second grade. And I remember thinking, if you smile really, really big, people will like you. And if you just ask them questions about themselves, they'll love you.
Yeah.
It's so true.
And
Yes.
like for a 7-year-old
Wow.
to know that that's what I need to do to get love.
Yes.
They don't have to actually know me, because there was,
Yeah.
even then, I'm like, if they ask me questions, they won't like me, because they realize that I'm not, and that fed.
You don't need to give them too much. Just, think
Right.
I'm great.
Just
and
think
and
I'm
let me
perfect.
ask you a question.
Yeah, and I'll just ask you about you, and they'll leave being like,
Stroke
she's
your
the
ego.
most
Yeah.
amazing person ever. I'm like, and they don't know
What a
shit
pretty
about
young
me.
lady.
Yeah, they know nothing about
Yeah.
me other than I'm amazing because I
This
listen
beautiful,
to them.
sweet young lady.
Yeah.
Wasn't she kind?
I thought that, and I was right.
Yeah.
I was right. I won all the awards. I'd get the citizenship award. I got the most popular, I was right. I knew what I needed to do to get that answer. What did they think of you? They said I was so sweet. They said I was so pretty. They said I was so kind. I knew what I needed to do to get that outside
Right.
affirmation. But if I didn't, something's wrong. Something's bad, because then they're going to realize that I'm a fraud. I remember having a very specific memory the day after homecoming. When you're a senior in high school, that's the end all be all to get homecoming
Oh,
queen.
yeah.
You'd think that's so important and
I'm
so
sure.
whatever.
Right.
And I remember,
it.
and I remember my dad telling me, because he was the superintendent of the school, that the principal had told him that usually the votes were divided down the middle. The black folks voted for the black folks, the white folks voted for
Public
the white
school,
folks.
small community,
Small,
so they would
it was
try
very
to divide
segregated.
it. Yep.
Our
So
dances
they
were
try to make
segregated.
sure-
Yes. And the principal told my dad I was the first person since he had worked there for 15, 20 years that got both.
Oh, wow.
And for a moment I was on this high. And I remember waking up the next morning so depressed and so empty. And I've never said it to anyone, but I was like, I got the thing, but I still feel broken.
And what did this do for me?
Right. I got the end all be all of what I thought made me important and special and valuable, and I still feel empty. It felt like a gaping hole inside of me the next morning. And I remember crying in my bed. I never talked about it because I was like, I should be so happy. I'm the most popular girl. And I was empty, and I felt it was one of the most depressing mornings because I was like, what's wrong with me? I got the thing, and I'm still not okay. I'm still not okay. Maybe I'm still not skinny enough, or I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not this enough, or I'm not.
What else can I do?
Right, because I got that, and I'm still empty. Because I was still looking outside of me.
And it was that soon that the wreck happened?
The wreck happened 2 weeks later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Yep. So I just turned 17. Wreck happens 2 weeks later. So, I go through the motions. I show up doing all the things I need to do, the little song and dance to be the most popular girl and get all the people to like me and ask everyone a million questions and be so friendly and so loving and so kind and trying to be so good. All I wanted, it makes me want to cry. I remember being here. I just wanted to be so good. Because I didn't know that I was inherently good because I exist. I didn't know that yet. I thought I had to have something outside of me. I needed outside validation constantly. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good. Because I feel broken, right? And then that was also reiterated in ministry as a part of. And so it was a heartbreaking time, but it was a very lonely, isolating time because I never talked about it to anyone. It was a very, I was very much in that inside of my own head, and food was my comfort. So then I moved to Nashville. I meet my very first boyfriend. My parents were very excited. He was a boy. They were convinced I was a lesbian, which I was like, I wish. That's still my dream. And I'm not. So my mom was so convinced because I never dated. I didn't know.
That is too funny.
Oh, so it was more my mom. She was so grateful that he was a boy.
Oh.
Yeah. But, what I also know now is I brothered every man that I met because I was raised. Lyle really helped raise me.
Your older brother.
And he didn't break my heart, right? And so I didn't necessarily have the core attachment, but I had massive attachment to my brother. So I brothered every man that I met. And I would make them my friend. And friends don't break your heart.
That's right.
And so I meet this man, and, he's like what I think is the picture perfect. He did the same job as me. He was a youth intern at the same church, so he has to love God. And he seems so good, and he's cool. He's a drummer. And we start dating. And, also, I had been taught a lot of stories about my body that were not true, that I don't believe at all anymore, like that my heart was deceitful and my sexuality is sinful and all these things. And so being a young hormonal person, you know, we have sex and then I'm like, well, we have to get married because we're bad,
we
broken.
have violated
And I
yeah.
am a liar. And the amount of shame that I felt because I was working at a church and I'm like, I am a fraud and a liar. If anyone knew who I actually was, they would just like kick me out. That was my belief system. They would kick me out any second. And so we got married literally 10 months after we met. It might as well have been 10 minutes because we were the sweetest little earnest idiots that ever were because we just desperately wanted to be good.
Yes.
And, you know, I mean, we liked each other, but like it wasn't
I
very
understand.
compatible.
Yes.
Like we didn't love each other. I didn't even know what love was. I was
Right.
a child. He was 21. We were babies. And so we start and I'm like, okay, well, this should make everything okay. Because now I did this. My life should be perfect. You know, we're going to start. Well, I'll work at the church and he's going to do his drums. He's so cool. We're going to start having babies. We'll then adopt a bunch of babies. We'll just do the thing that like fits in the perfect little box and my life will be perfect now. And you know, God giggles because that's so cute. It's so cute. So, of course, he doesn't make all my pain go away because obviously he cannot. And he has his own struggles and he ended up dealing with his own addictive things and his own trauma that neither of us had ever had tools for. We had both had a lot of religious trauma. We both had a lot of childhood stuff. We, you know, there was
You're
so much.
bringing it all.
Yes,
That's
and
your
no
dowry.
tools.
Both of you are bringing a dowry on that one. It's
With-
not just a woman. It's like, here's what I bring to
Totally.
this marriage. Let's try to live off of that.
And zero tools.
Yeah.
Zero tools on how to manage it. It's just, but we look, you know, everyone looked up to us. We just have like the sweetest, we're so nice to each other. We have no tools to communicate. None. Zero. Absolutely. We just stuff it and sweet and smile and sweet. We're very kind to each other. And it was only about a year into our marriage that I started having this crazy shooting pain going up my head. And we didn't know what was causing it. And when it would shoot up my head, I remember sometimes it would just make me have to lay down. I would black out. It would leave me with like, it's hard to even describe the kind of headache it would leave me with. It felt like lightning was shooting up my head. It was terrifying. It was terrifying because what was so wild is after I left that wreck, even though I had all this crazy stuff, I did not have a lot of physical pain after that. If I danced too much, I was always a big dancer. If I danced too much, I'd get sore, but nothing to write home about. I never talked, you know, it wasn't like anything I'd complain about. It was just I'd get a little achy. And so all of a sudden, which was a miracle after what I'd been smashed by an ambulance, you know? So all of a sudden, I'm in my 20s. I just started this marriage. My life's supposed to like come together in this perfect way. And all of a sudden, I start having this debilitating pain. And so we start going to all these doctors. They send me to physical therapy. You know, they start trying all these things. A doctor has me get an MRI. Well, when the film comes back, there is a black spot on the film. And the doctor's like, oh, that's just the magnet interacting with the wire from your fusion, but everything around it looks fine. Let's just get you in physical therapy. Physical therapy, nothing worked at all. So then they started, the first drug they ever gave me was hydrocodone, and I loved it very much. And then I stopped being able to sleep, so then they gave me Ambien, and it just built from there. It just built from there.
Take this. Take more.
And what I also didn't understand, you know, we've all heard of fight, flight, freeze, appease. I had a lot of appease growing up. You just smile and go along with what you need to do. But all of a sudden, I really moved into freeze. So much trauma had happened. Yeah. And I didn't know this at the time, that while I was laying in bed, taking these narcotics, watching every show that ever existed and eating my feelings all day long, that I was in a freeze state because I was traumatized, right? And I didn't have to feel all of it. I was just frozen. Of course, I didn't understand it. Of course, I wasn't in therapy. I was just taking the drugs that they told me, that the doctor said. And this went on for 5 years, but they just started giving me more and more and more drugs. So 5 years in, I'm on highest level of fentanyl because I had had little breakdowns along the way. Nothing as big as what would come, but little breakdowns because I couldn't handle how much pain I was in. Like I would lay in this bed and I was, you know, with disordered eating, you already believe that your body is bad.
Right.
Something is inherently wrong with it. I believed my body hated me when pain moved in. And so I, in turn, hated my body. I'd already been trying to control my body. I had no idea what embodiment was because I was so disassociated. I wasn't in my body at all. And I've learned so much about all of that since. But of course I didn't know any of this. Of course I didn't have tools for any of this. And so everything that I was learning, I was just being medicalized. I was, there was nothing about trauma, how this could be connected to trauma. It was just, here's another pill, here's more pills, here's more pills. And I just went along with it because I didn't want to hurt every second of every day. And I wouldn't be able to sleep because I was laying in bed all day. But I would lay there and I would just pray, like, if there is a God, just take me, like, let me fall asleep because I don't want to be here. Like, nothing about my life was looking the way I thought it would look. I had to quit my job, which I also didn't really believe. I had to go through my own deconstruction. I had done all the things that I thought I was supposed to do to have the perfect life.
I should be at a point to where I'm in my church, I'm married, I
I'm
have
doing
children,
all the
I
right
have a
thing.
job,
Yeah.
I have this thing
Yes.
that I have been
And I
seeing
should
the
be
picture
rewarded
of
for it.
and be rewarded for
Yes.
it because I have been statistically, Ruthie, to be on that level of opiates for that long, statistically, and I've read about every stat on it, when you get to the fentanyl level, I don't care if it's off the street or administered by a doctor. When you get to that level, statistically, even more so than the wreck that you did die from for a moment, statistically, the odds of you coming off of that are close to zero.
Yeah, and I did it by myself with support from my family, but I did it on, I went to a doctor, asked, and they started just cutting it each month. Like, it is a miracle. I don't know.
It's a miracle.
I'm like, it's something bigger than me. I'm like, and at the time I felt abandoned by God. I felt abandoned by life. I felt abandoned in every way. I felt so alone and so isolated in this bed. And my partner at the time, he was touring. I don't blame him for not wanting to be there. He did the best he could too. We were children.
He had his own thing.
So he's getting the hell out of town, which I don't blame him. I would not want to be. It was oppressive and heartbreaking and, depressing.
Being in the home with somebody that's in that situation, and I've certainly had friends do it. And I wasn't in the bed, but I certainly did it in my breakdown period to my family to a degree. You're pulling, you don't mean to, but you're pulling everyone down around you.
Yes.
Because it's depressing and it's contagious.
Yes. And there was no room for him to not be, and he was not okay either, but mine was so much bigger that there was no room for him to not be okay.
What do you think kept you from the average person, even if they're getting support, weaning off? The brain says, feed me more of this.
Yeah.
And so much of what happens is then they turn and they buy it on the street, and then there they are. I mean, you avoided that path. I
don't have an answer other than an act of God. I don't, or a higher self, or I don't know, because it wasn't, I never abused it. And
maybe they were giving you so much you didn't have to.
Totally.
But then once it was coming off of it, I guess you were seeing the light.
So done. I mean, I think that nervous breakdown was, so basically what happened is 5 years in, a doctor was like, I can't tell you what's going on until I see what's under that spot. A $50 x-ray, which, by the way, everything had been out of pocket up to that point. So we were broke because I wasn't working. He's a, self-employed artist, and it was a pre-existing condition. So insurance never covered anything that I was doing. So all of this money was also going to my health, which was devastating. So 5 years in, this doctor says, I got to see what's under that spot. We find out the wire's in my brain. I'm the only human that's ever had that. I'm putting quotes up, should be dead, should not have brain functioning, should not be walking. There's a wire piercing my brainstem. It's unheard of. And a very few weeks later, maybe 2 or 3, at the time, my partner went back on a tour. So I'm at home by myself dealing with this wire that I just found out is in my brain. My dad says that he's going to come see me. He goes to visit his Amish friends, and he's picking up a mule or something, and he's going to come see me on the way home. And he had told my godfather and my mom that he was going to tell me that, so I could have this life-saving surgery that I had to have, that insurance wasn't going to cover, that if he needed to sell our farm, he would, so that he could save his little girl's life. And on the way to come see me, he had a freak accident, fell down a flight of stairs. We don't know all the details. I don't know if it was also connected to his Marfan syndrome with his heart. Who knows? Because no one was around him. But he fell down a flight of stairs and ultimately died from brain damage. And, you know, at the time, all I could think was like, if there's a God, F you. Truthfully, that's what I thought at the time. I felt abandoned by God, and now I felt abandoned by life and my dad. Like, the man who's supposed to come save the day for me is gone. And I wanted to die. You know, it was just, I was so disassociated and so numb. It was like I was watching it all from up here, because I could not be in my body. I could not be with the hell that I don't care what anyone believes. I don't personally believe in hell, but I know hell because I lived
I know it too.
In hell, and I was living in hell. I felt so alone. I felt so abandoned, and I felt so forgotten.
Yes.
And I just begged to die. I never would have done anything about it. I never made plans to do anything. I just was like, take me. Just want to die. If I have to live in this bed without my dad for the rest of my life, in these four walls, in this hellacious body that hurts so bad, take me now if this is the rest of my life. And, you know, it was a very dark period, to say the very least. And, you know, one really precious, another glimmer. There's been little glimmers all throughout. My godfather ended up setting up a medical fund in our dad's honor because they knew that that was his last wish. And all this money came in because people would be like, your dad bought my prom dress. Your dad sent me on my senior trip. Your dad fixed my roof. Your dad. And we did not have, like, my godfather who ran the bank.
He was an educator in small community.
Totally. He would take loans out to be able to do these things for people. He was so generous. You know, he had his flaws just like everyone else. And there were so many beautiful, his heart was to serve and to be so generous and to give. And that generosity ultimately saved my life, because the amount of money that came in honor of my father fully paid for this surgery.
People were paying it all back, paying it forward.
At the Mayo Clinic, the top surgery, you know, like, it was an incredible amount of money that was raised because of his love for people. And so we went in, do the surgery, and, you know, this is so human, but we put all of our hope and put all our eggs in this basket. So for me, this is the surgery that's going to have to fix me.
Yeah.
This is it. This is going to have to, you know, save my life, but also take all the pain away. And if it doesn't, there's no more hope, you know? So I don't think I even realized the severity of, like, I could come out not alive or paralyzed, because they didn't tell me a lot of those details. Honestly, I was so disassociated. My brothers were the ones talking to the doctors. I just couldn't handle it. It was too much for me. It was too painful. I was not well, as you can imagine, not to mention on all these narcotics. Like, I was a shadow of Ruthie. And so I go in, they do the surgery, it was a miracle. They were able to get there's still wire in my neck, but they took the piece out that was in my brain, took bone from my other hip, refused it with more titanium screws. And I walk out with another big old neck brace with that wire in my hand, but I'm in even more pain because I got some pretty severe nerve damage from the surgery itself. So I go back to a bed for 2 more years because now I feel even more depressed, and they have me on even more drugs now because now they added morphine. So I go home with a baggie of drugs and I go right back to bed because I'm like, that was my one chance of feeling better, and I feel even worse. Like, I'm so glad to be alive and walking, but not really. You know, I should be so grateful for that, but I'm in so much pain. And this is I'm 31 years old, and this is how I have to live the rest of my life. Like, no, thank you. No, thank you. So that went on for 2 more years until I had, it was very clear that my partner at the time was done. Very clear. So I have a massive nervous breakdown. I stopped sleeping for 2 months, have to move home like we talked about in the last podcast. And that was the beginning of a whole new era because I had to learn how to live with pain. I couldn't, I remember having a conversation with our brother Tim, and he was like, babe, You can either live in your bed and hurt all the time, or you can learn to live and be of service and hurt. And right now, those are your two options. I didn't know that there was more. I didn't know that there was like emotional health that I could have and mental health that I could like, attain. All my focus is on, you could not tell me that anything I was suffering from was anything out of this physiological pain.
Right.
And if anyone would try to tell me that there could be mental pieces a part of it, I would want to punt them to the freaking moon. I'm like, girl, I have a wire in my brain. Try to tell me about mental health. Like I couldn't hear it yet. It was offensive to me because I'm like, talk to me when you have a wire pierce your brainstem.
You don't understand what I've been feeling.
Yeah, this isn't a mental health issue. This is a physical health issue. And so that, that was the beginning of a whole new era of like going through this really painful divorce. He ended up with one of my closest friends, which now, like Eric and I pray for him every single night.
Right.
And I thank God for him because he had to leave me. I could not, I think I would have stayed in that bed. I was, there's a quote about the nervous system. The nervous system would prefer a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. And because that's what I knew, that felt safer. He still paid my bills. I didn't have to like change. I was terrified. And all of a sudden, I don't have that support anymore. I have to figure out how to live a life, make money, live with pain. And that has sent me, now I do a lot of work called the invitation of pain. And it's not just chronic. It's mental, physical, spiritual pain. Because that pain, listen, I want to talk to God about it when I go back. But I'm like, I don't know why breakdowns and pain and all of this is usually our invitation into doing such deep, beautiful work. But that is every awakened person I've ever met lived through hell the first half of their life.
Absolute hell.
Every single one. And I don't know why that's the setup, but I just know it's true. And it became a massive part of my journey of unlearning so many things that I believed that made me valuable, worthy, good. And honestly, it sent me on this path of like to the work that I do today. And it's been a long journey. It's not like it's been smooth. It has been rocky and upside down and scary and hard. And, it was really interesting writing that book actually brought another breakdown. And it's because I actually was digging into a lot of...
Because it takes you to that place that you've tried to lock away.
Totally. That I was disassociated from the first time around. I was not feeling any of that the first round around. And the beauty of writing, it's so powerful. And it's actually ultimately became the most healing.
Right. Ultimately, it's incredibly transformative. But I tell people it's not for the faint-hearted.
No.
It is not for the faint-hearted.
No.
Beware.
Beware. And it's so profound because it brought me into such a truer version of me, but it was so devastating. I just turned in this book. I stopped sleeping again exactly 7 years later from the first breakdown. And I'd never heard of 7-year cycles. It's a very big thing. 7 years.
Oh, I do.
To the week that I had my first breakdown, I break down again. 7 years. I had just turned in my book and, it's all about healing and the amount of shame that I felt because I'm like, I've done all this work. I have all this understanding. I'm such a fraud. I'm putting this work out into the world and I'm a fraud and having a breakdown. Like, take the book back. I'll give the advance back. I'm a liar. I'm a fraud. The amount of shame.
That breaks my heart.
I know. There's a Buddhist teaching that's so beautiful that all parts of us belong. Even if we are taught certain parts are bad or evil or sinful, all parts of us belong. And when these parts, these very human parts, that these patterns that we've used to survive with come up, so often we become our own second arrow, our own second wound, because we shame ourselves for having this experience. And so I felt like I had a weighted blanket of shame over me because I felt like, oh my God, I've done all this work and I'm a fraud. I'm a liar. I am crazy. Who am I to try to help other people? Who am I to put this book in the world? I'm a fraud. And so I ended up doing a month of a residential treatment to get sleeping again, to get back to some kind of level of, groundedness. And that is where I actually began learning about internal family systems. I started studying after that. I really got into Carl Jung when he talks about shadow work. And, as bright as your light is as big as your shadow is going to be.
Oh, yes.
And every single human has all these parts, yet we're taught just show the good, joyful, sweet, kind, loving, brave, strong. We've all lied. People have stolen and cheated, and that's all in us too. But then we're shaming and beating the crap out of ourselves for having these other patterns and human experiences that we learn to survive. Disordered eating sits at my table, right? I learned that, like, if I hadn't learned how to stuff my feelings, I might not be here today. Right? But yet I would shame myself for binging and beat the crap out of myself instead of learning tools with compassion and love to enter into that place, to love on that part of me, that pattern within me that learned to survive.
It may never totally go away.
It's in me.
It's in you,
It's
and it may
me.
never. Tools is such an important thing because when we just try to will it away.
Totally.
And just say, well, I'll stop that tomorrow.
Good luck.
Tomorrow, I won't eat the bag of Oreos.
Yes.
Or whatever it is.
And that's what's so beautiful about shadow work. And that's become the foundation of the work that I do today. And it's all rooted in self-compassion and love. It's so rooted, and it's through practice, because we've been practicing beating the crap out of ourselves most of our lives. Like, I'm not doing this well enough. I'm not doing this. I'm not good enough. I'm not, and comparing ourselves and feeling like we have it all together. And that's just not human. Like,
it's not.
It's not. You are not meant to be perfect. Perfectionism sits at my table. Control sits at my table, right? I have lied. I have stolen. I have cheated. I have
had intrusive and crazy thoughts, or so-called crazy.
I have unconsciously used people. I wasn't aware that I was. Like, Carl Jung has this beautiful quote. He's like, until the unconscious becomes conscious, you're going to have the same result over and over and call it fate. And you're just going to think that's the way it is.
The way it is.
That's all it is, until you start learning, like, oh, these unconscious patterns that I learned to survive, I can bring them out and actually bring love to them and care for them and listen to them. And if I need to make amends for them, it's like there's something so beautiful. All of a sudden, those parts of me are not in the driver's seat anymore. Love gets to move into the driver's seat, right? And love, I know for a fact, no one on this planet has ever healed through shame. Ever.
That is an actual fact.
It can toxically motivate us.
Or blame either. Blame and shame are pretty much the two things.
Yes.
And certainly other people have responsibility in things, but at the end of the day, shame, number one, blame a close second. It will not happen.
Shame keeps us in our patterns, right? Shame keeps us wanting to numb. Shame keeps us, because it feels so bad to have these experiences, that we want to cover it up and numb it and avoid it. And for me, my earliest memory is sitting in front of a TV with junk food. When I feel shame come up, or I feel sad, or I feel depressed, I've learned so many tools to be with it, but that is still in me. You can catch me laying in bed, watching TV, and eating my feelings. Like, when I'm really in my patterns, because it's in me.
Yeah.
It is in me. Freeze is in me. But when I meet those parts with compassion, there's a really incredible teacher named Tara Brach, and she has is it called acronym called RAIN, which means like recognize. So let's say I'm wanting to binge. Recognize that part of you's here. What if you allow that part to come have a seat next to you and look at it? And it's not who you are. It's a part of you. It's not your identity is love. Mm-hmm. Who you are is wholeness and love. But this pattern is here. What if we invite it to come over and have a conversation with us? I is when we investigate, and that's when we actually get to go in our bodies, where, I was taught my heart was sinful, my flesh was deceitful. Actually makes me want to cry. Like, our little bodies, these vessels that are holding our souls, these beautiful vessels that are doing so much good, that every experience I've ever had in this life has been through this body. And she is good. And she is worthy of my love and affection, and to listen to her. So I is when you investigate, okay, when I feel that shame, where do I feel that in my body? What does it feel like? Is there a color? Is there a shape? Does it remind me of a younger time in my life? When have I felt this before? Because it's usually, they say when our responses are hysterical, they're usually historical. It's old, right? That little girl in me needs to know that she's safe, that she doesn't have to perform, that she gets to be who she is. Where do I feel that in my body? My body that is so good, right? And then the last step in is nurture. How can I speak to that part of me with so much care, with so much love, with so much affection? Because all I've done most of my life is shame the crap out of myself for being human. And that's kept me in my patterns and kept me wanting to numb and kept me wanting to drink or take narcotics or binge, right? But when I meet that part, that little girl who laid in that bed, I've had, visuals doing meditations of like crawling into the bed with that girl that's doped up on all these narcotics, watching every reality show, binging on sugar, and just crawling in that bed with her and just holding her. And just telling her how good and how loved and how worthy, and that this isn't the end of her story. And what's so profound, we are so hardwired for healing. Our limbic brain doesn't know time.
Oh, right.
It doesn't know time. So when I visually go back in and take care of that little girl inside, my brain doesn't know that didn't happen. That is a fact. This is scientific. It sounds real woo-woo, which I am. I will admit I am very woo-woo. This is factual. I have gone back into little girl Ruthie. I have gone back into the hospital through meditation, through doing this work, and picked up Ruthie in the hospital that was chained to the bed, who was on life support, who was chained to 9 million tubes and all the things. And I have taken those out and pulled the catheter out and pulled all the wires out and pulled off the life support and taken the chains. And I have picked up that little girl in her neck brace. And I have carried her out and told her, I've got you now. And I am going to take care of you. And you are so safe, you precious soul. And this is not the end of your story. And you're going to be able to do so much beautiful work in this world. And my brain doesn't know that that didn't happen. That is real for my, we create new neural pathways.
Absolutely, we do.
In our brain. It is never too late. And so this is just, sent me on the most beautiful path that now, because, I have desperately needed this work for myself. And now I have the utmost honor and privilege of sitting across from people today, every day for my work. A lot of my clients are therapists. I have queer clients. I've had trans clients. I get to sit across from them and mirror how worthy and how good and how deserving and how this is just the beginning of their story. This is not the end. That healing is for them and they are deserving because they exist. Period. End of statement. Like, they don't have to do anything to be more deserving in this moment. And it's everything that I've needed for myself. It's the only thing I offer in this world is the work that I continue to do for myself. And I will be doing until the day I've arrived nowhere. And that's what's so beautiful about shadow work and parts work is you get to be so human. You don't have to pretend that you have it all together. Like, I believe I don't even talk about the healing journey anymore. I talk about the wholeness journey. And wholeness means all of me, all of my parts, the parts that have broken down and had nervous breakdowns, that have been addicted, that have, stolen and lied and cheated and used people. Like, all of that gets to be here. It just doesn't have to be the driver of my life anymore.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. And when you talk about going back to that childhood you, I talk a lot about in storytelling and people learning and finding their stories. I always say it's important for all of us to realize you can revise your story.
Yes.
And you actually can revise the history of your story. You can.
And
you
it's
can
important too.
It's critical.
Yes.
Revising our stories.
Yes.
Working at curating our stories, revising
Yes.
our stories.
Yes.
Is so much about how we get to the better today
Yes.
and how we get to the better tomorrow. So I do believe
Yes.
you. And I don't think that's woo-woo.
Yes. I love that you just said that because it's the truest thing I know. I love saying this. I'm so down to be wrong about any single thing. But I, in this deep meditation one time, and who cares if I am so wrong, if it helps me love myself and other people more, I don't care.
I'm with you on that.
But I had this deep, deep, deep meditation one time, and I do believe that my ex-husband, I believe we had some kind of soul contract to be a part of each other's lives, and we were a part of each other's awakening. And I had this vision one time that like his little soul talking to God before he came, and my little soul talking to God before we came, saying, I want to play that role for Ruthie. Wow. And I saw also the woman he left me for, who was a dear friend. Again, I don't care if I'm wrong, but I remember coming out of that meditation, bawling my eyes out, because I'm like, they were so crucial in my awakening. If he had not left me and seen this other thing that felt like it could, save him, if he had not left me, I could not be the woman that I am today. I could not be doing the work that I feel so called to do today. Like, I could not expand anymore within that marriage, and I did not have the strength. I was not strong enough at the time to. He gave me. I truly thank God for him. I saw the woman he left me for a few summers ago at a wedding, and I got to go up to her and give her the biggest hug. I invited her to come over for tea, and I got to tell her, I'm like, I thank God for you. Every time I think of you, I think, God, I hope you're free. Like, please don't hold on to this anymore, because I love the woman that I get to be today. And I could not be her if that had not happened. And you played this crucial role for me. And I thank God for you. And it doesn't take away, listen, it wasn't great. It was heartbreaking. It was hard.
Well, sure.
Two things get to be true.
Yeah, because it's what we talk about failure. You were at a moment of failure, but yet it unlocked incredible opportunity.
And that is a reframing. At the time, I felt abandoned. I felt so hurt. They had screwed me over, all these things. Yes. And, I love that part of me. I had to feel that anger. I had to feel that hurt. I had to feel that abandonment. I had to feel that loss. And thank you, God. Thank you, God. They played the most beautiful roles for me. And both things get to be true.
Both can be true.
And I don't want to, I do believe pain and loss and heartbreak, we have free will. And for a very long time, I was parked in my victim story. And I can dance in that story still. It's not like I'm this enlightened version that doesn't still get in that place. It's still so hard living with pain every day. It's so hard. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And two things get to be true. It has sent me on the most profoundly beautiful healing wholeness journey that I could not even comprehend. And it's so cute. I actually wrote about this in my newsletter a few weeks ago. When I think about 21-year-old Ruthie, if she could have gotten a glimpse into the future of who I am today, I would have been like, take me now, God.
Yeah.
Abort mission. She is crazy. Take me now. She is a sinner. She has lost her mind. She is going to burn in hell. She's going to live in a bed, addicted to narcotics, go through a divorce, live in sin with her fiance. I just would have been not have children. Right? When people ask me when I was a little girl, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'd be like, a mom. Unapologetically, a mom. I love children on a level I can't even describe. And
I've seen that. You do.
Obsessed with them. If there's a kid or an animal around, I can't see grown-ups. I'm like, just give me the children and the animals. And it's so beautiful. Again, it's a reframing of the story. I believe the work that I do today is so motherly. It's so maternal. And because I do not, now it doesn't mean I haven't had to grieve, that's not a part of my story. It's not what I expected. It's not what I planned. It's not what I hoped for. And I know that because I don't have biological children, it gives me a space to be able to show up in this world and mother in a way that I do have space for. I get to mother these clients. I get to be maternal with my, dear, dear friends. I get to be so maternal with nieces and nephews and my best friend's children. Yes. I am such a mother to 9 million animals. You can't even imagine. But I am a mother. It doesn't look the way I expected, but ultimately had to learn how to really be a maternal mother to myself. And now that's what I get to mirror to others. And I get to show them that, and I get to gift them that. And I know that's one of my dharmas on this planet. That is one of my gifts in this life, is to bring this maternal, it's so funny. I'm hiring a new operations assistant right now. And I had a call yesterday with someone that she used to work with as a reference. And she literally stops me in the middle. She was like, "Are you a mom?" She was like, I just feel so cared for by your voice. And you just feel so motherly. Like, I don't know this person. I don't know. I was like, no, but thank you so much. And, that's not me like trying to toot my own horn, but that is one of my giftings.
No.
And
but yet it would have scared young Ruthie.
Oh,
literally perhaps to death.
Truly, I would have I could not think of a greater hell if you had told me what my life would have turned out like. But what's so beautiful is I look at my life today and I truthfully, as painful and heartbreaking and the nervous breakdowns and the pain and all the things, I love the woman I get to be today. I love the way that I get to love. I love the way that I allow myself to receive love. I love the work that I get to do, the clients. I think about like the ripple effects, like so many of my clients are therapists, and I think about the ripple effects of how they're getting to learn these practices to bring more love. And I'm like, this is the greatest honor and privilege that I would never have been able to get to if that cute little sweet basic 21-year-old in her little tiny box smiling and trying to pretend like everything was perfect hadn't had her world turned upside down in 9 million ways.
She's Ruthie Lindsey, my sister. You can find her on Substack at Love's Invitation, her newsletter. It's awesome. She's got thousands of subscribers who tune in for so much of this messaging and healing work. Follow her on Instagram. Check out her story, Ruthie Lindsey.